Hello, everyone. I am GeekWire co-founder John Cook, and on behalf of the entire GeekWire team, welcome to our virtual session here today on the future of sports. So I couldn't think of a more timely discussion to be having today, and we've got a great panel discussion ahead of us. And based on the turnout today and the number of audience questions that we had, I know we're going to have a really dynamic discussion. Many of you pre-submitted questions to us already, and I'm going to try to get to as many of those as I can throughout the conversation. So thanks to all of you who sent in a question to us. I know this is a very timely topic, and we'll dive into as many of those as we can. So this is part of an ongoing number of virtual events that we're hosting at GeekWire. We've been covering everything from the pandemic to business transformation and everything in between. And today we're excited to talk about sports. But before introducing our panel, I wanted to thank our amazing sponsors who are helping to make this event possible today. Davis Wright Tremaine, a leading Seattle law firm, which among other things has a vibrant and growing media, entertainment, and sports practice. So make sure to check out DWT, Davis Wright Tremaine. And thanks to our great partners, Pete Johnson and Craig Baker and the rest of the DW team for their ongoing support of GeekWire. Also, a great big thanks to Pure Storage, a leader in AI and data analytics that's helping clients use existing data to transform their businesses. To learn more about their modern data approach, check out purestorage.com. Thanks again to both Davis Wright Tremaine and Pure Storage for sponsoring today. Also, a quick programming note for us here at GeekWire. We are hosting our first ever virtual GeekWire Awards next Thursday, July 23rd. So make sure you tune into that. Just go to geekwire.com/awards to learn more about this event. We will be recognizing innovators in 12 different categories and naming those winners throughout the hour-long show. And it should be pretty fun. We've got some unique and fun surprises in store, so make sure to check that out at geekwire.com/awards. And finally, thanks to our GeekWire members who help support our daily journalism here at GeekWire. And if you're interested in a corporate or individual membership, just go to geekwire.com/memberships. Now, let's jump in. I want to introduce our great panel that we have here today, starting with Jennifer Cohen, who was named the 15th Athletic Director of the University of Washington in 2016. She's worked at the UW for 21 years, and she's a graduate of San Diego State University and holds a master's in physical education from Pacific Lutheran. Also joining us is Adrian Hanauer, the majority owner of the Seattle Sounders FC, the two-time MLS Cup champions. A Seattle native, Adrian is the leader of the Rave Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm of the Sounders. Also joining us is Pat Chun, who was hired as the athletic director of Washington State University in January 2018. He was the first Asian American athletic director at a Power 5 conference. He previously served as AD at Florida Atlantic University, and before that spent 15 years in the athletics department at his alma mater, the Ohio State University. And I've got to say, as a proud Ohioan, it's great to have a Buckeye here on this panel. So with that, we're going to jump right in. We are living certainly in interesting times with a global pandemic, social justice protests, an economic recession, and a divisive political environment. With this all happening at once, many are wondering how sports, which have historically bind us together, will return. So with that, I'm going to bounce off our first question, which really came from many of our audience members, which is a very basic and simple question, but really complex when you think about it. And it's the question that's on everybody's mind. What will it take for sports to return to normal? So let's start there.
I'm just going to start out, John, by saying in your list of crises, you left off climate change and murder hornets. So you got to update your list.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks for making it upbeat here.
And that's the only thing I can add to the conversation today. So I'll let Pat or Jen answer first.
Well, let's talk about the future of sports and what is this a new normal? Do you think there is going to be are we going to return to an era where we experience sports as we have in the past, or has this past 5 months altered sports forever?
I'll jump in, and then these two can add on. I think we all have different perspectives. I mean, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question. I do think that anytime you go through the challenges that you just described, those adversities are all opportunities, and that I don't think any of us as individuals or as organizations, whether we're in sports or another industry, are ever going to come out fully the same. And I don't think that has to be a bad thing. You know, I think that we need to be thinking about ways that this can be a positive thing for the future. I don't know what it's going to look like, but what I do know is that people love sports and will continue to love sports. And as you mentioned, it's a great unifier, and people are hungry for it. I mean, Adrian can probably speak to this better than us just because his team's going, you know, and there's activity there. But I'm really hopeful that what we do and what our student athletes do is going to be something that people are always going to want to be a part of in the future. The way they participate may look differently over a period of time.
Yeah, Pat or Adrian, any thoughts on whether this current climate has altered things forever?
Well, I do know this. I took a little bit of time today. I would call myself a Tiger watcher when it comes to the sport of golf. And knowing Tiger was playing the Memorial today really reaffirms, at least for me, I mean, there is a joy of watching people compete at the highest level. We're an unabashed soccer family as well. I'm doing this just to be nice to Adrian because I promised my daughter a Sounders game and we haven't been able to make it over there yet. But watching soccer on TV is something that's important to me and my family. So, how we consume it, how we go forward, Jen's absolutely right. Nobody really knows where we're going to be, but I'll tell you what, if anything, I think this time away from sports has really reaffirmed how important sports are to the DNA of our country and people who love it.
And look, John, I as I was thinking about this conversation today, I was trying to come up with answers, and I think the consistent message you'll probably hear from us, I would guess, is we have more questions than answers. And it also dawned on me that every one of the people that are watching today and in every industry, we're all going through it. And you could easily replace the three of us with three people in the travel industry or retail or restaurant or, quite frankly, technology or media, and you're going to run into I think some themes which are the science is going to determine a lot what happens in a lot of industries. If we have a vaccine relatively quickly and as a country we can figure out how to actually get it to our people and people actually get it, then the outcome is going to be a lot different than if that's not the case. What does the next few months look like? What are therapeutics? All the medical stuff. But then I think that for sure the sports industry and others there will be change from this. Jen is absolutely right. People love sport. People will come back to sport. But there's a long list of whether it's broadcast, new technologies in broadcast, the way we interact with athletes, both how the organizations interact with athletes and our fans, and something as simple as these video calls, Zoom, I mean, is certainly changing the way we look at our business and the way we do certain activities. So again, we can get into more detail, but
yeah, thanks, Adrian. I want to stay on that point because I think that's really important, especially for folks in the GeekWire community and audience that are typically described as innovators or disruptors. This is certainly a period of disruption, and it's impacting and disrupting sports in a lot of interesting ways. And as many folks know, in periods of disruption, there's a lot of opportunity that can arise. So I guess I want to ask on that front, are there disruptions that are happening now because of this? Maybe it's now you can scout players through video chat or have a communication. It's more common to do that. So it's easier to interact with players, especially Adrian, for you, who's recruiting all over the globe. So what are the potential positive impacts that you might be seeing coming out of this? Because I think that might give an idea of where sports are headed in the next 3, 5, 7 years.
Yeah, also, okay, I'll take a quick shot at it because I'm not shy to throw my 2 cents in. But, look, I think, we're 4 months into this. So I'm not sure that I'm ready to, and I think we all hope that we're 6 months from maybe coming out starting to come out the other end of this. And so I think there's a balance to be struck between, blowing up existing stadiums and building them completely differently because of COVID versus how do we do the right things to kind of get through the next 6 months and then the next year after that and see where we're at. Look, there are things as simple, John, as, we had a lot, as a league, we have a lot of meetings around the country where different teams fly together and spend 4 hours in a conference room doing a lot of what can be accomplished on this video call. And I think that a lot of those activities, for at least the time being, are going to be extremely, impacted. There are, again, technologies that were on their way, contactless stadium experiences where, you're not dealing with tickets and scanning and hitting keypads and money and, things like that are going to be affected in a big way. Cleanliness, like disinfectant, like some of the same technologies they're using in other industries.
Yeah, and I want to jump into some of the things the Sounders have been doing in that realm, because I think you're definitely have been a leader in some of those areas. Pat or Jen, anything that you're seeing right now that you think might be a permanent change, either positive or negative for that matter?
Like Adrian, I'm not sure if we exactly know long-term, like probably the examples that you might be looking for. So I'll pivot this to a kind of a different example, which is just, personal development and leadership development in this time. What an amazing time to grow as a human being, and a leader. And we've seen that with our coaches. Our industry is very noisy. It's very complicated. It's so competitive. It's so fast-paced. And it's really hard for coaches in particular to have holistic perspective. And I really believe for us to be the very best, especially for what we do, because we serve students, that's what we do, that's our purpose, that our coaches can slow down enough ever to really reflect in a way, to really think about like their values. And they think they're doing that, but nothing like this time. This is really, for our Husky coaches, it has really challenged them in ways they never imagined. And what's happened from that is that I've watched them grow in ways, and just as human beings, and how they collaborate and how they view students. And I really think that's going to have an impact on the way that they coach and teach and develop students moving forward. So that's something I'm really excited about that we wouldn't have had. You try to do that in this role, and you do it a little bit, and some coaches get it more than others. But when people are forced into it and then they realize, oh gosh, I'm better for this, that's empowering, and that will force people to get more uncomfortable more often. That's my hope.
Yeah, great. So there's been some news that's been breaking, and obviously this is a rapidly changing situation, but NCAA President Mark Emmert just announced new guidelines today for college sports in the fall. The message doesn't sound too good, actually. I'm going to quote from him here. He said, "Today, sadly, the data point in the wrong direction. If there is to be college sports in the fall, we need to get a much better handle on the pandemic. Among the new guidelines are daily self-health checks, testing and results within 72 hours of competition and high-risk sports, appropriate use of face coverings." I know the Pac-12 is already implementing many of these things. but it does spark a question. Do you think it's actually possible to meet these guidelines and ensure the safety of players, staff, and coaches, given the uncertainty around COVID?
Well, I don't know.
Why don't you start and I'll jump.
Yeah, I don't know if it ensures what we needed to ensure, but it does create a national standard, which the NCAA needed to do. The reality, the way we're set up as an industry, and specifically the five high resource conferences have all worked toward developing their own protocols relative to how we manage through COVID-19. Luckily for us in the Pac-12, when you look at Jen's institution as an example, it's our belief within the Pac-12, we have some of the greatest medical minds and scientists working in our favor and actually working for some of the professional leagues as consultants. So the protocols and policies we built as a Pac-12 have been well vetted, have been well thought out. We vote, unanimously as 12 to implement, and they're evolving too. I mean, we get Jen and I get medical updates every week from our medical committee. So it's ongoing, but the goal here is, can we give ourselves the best chance to have a safe, healthy environment before we could ever go forward. But I think Dr. Emmert's right, though. I mean, it's the data point is moving in the wrong direction, and that is the most concerning thing for us right now. We don't have the opportunity to go into a bubble like MLS or NBA, so we're in a very different spot than the pro sports.
And that does speak to the challenge here, because the NCAA is a national organization, and you've got hotspots where I don't think you would want to travel into if you are part of the Pac-12, perhaps, right now. And so it seems like that becomes extremely challenging when you're talking about a national organization where you can't sequester everybody in one location. So I know you've tried to focus only in on a conference-only schedule, but are there other ways to maybe mitigate the challenges associated with that?
Well, the best thing about having a conference-only schedule is we can all agree on the same medical protocols. The challenge for the Pac-12 compared to the other Power 5 leagues is we are the most geographically diverse. So if you're in the Big Ten, by and large, most of those schools could get on a bus and go to their competitive institutions. Jen and I don't have those options. We can basically do the Northwest, and after that, everything becomes a little bit more laborious. So every league has its different challenges, but we all know what's at stake here. We have these student athletes. I mean, Jen had the same experience. There's no worse moment than in the spring semester when we had to tell our teams, hey, it's time to go home. I mean, you got seniors who are never going to have that opportunity, who lost out on opportunities to never play again. You got all these young people that work so hard for to be college athletes. I think the hope is, hey, I don't want to have those conversations again this fall. I know Jen doesn't want to have those conversations because, I mean, these are their hopes and dreams, and good, bad, or indifferent, how they define themselves to a certain degree, and the window to play sports in your lifetime is really small when you look back on your life. So the hope is, can we get something? Can we salvage something for these young people for this fall is imperative for all of us.
Can I add a little bit to that, John? I think one of the things that's gut-wrenching for Pat and I is that we're seeing our student athletes be real successful at this right now. They're very motivated to stay healthy because they want to be able to have their collegiate experience and study and compete here. So we have almost 200 student athletes here right now training and with each other in a dorm-like environment. And we've only had 4 test positives, and we're doing surveillance testing, and we are fortunate because we do get a quick turnaround time because of UW-Med, and we're not getting new cases. And that's because I really credit our students for that, because they are doing everything it takes right now in the environment that they're in, because they are so very motivated to want to be able to compete here at our university. And every one of our schools that has students back, our student athletes this is the environment that they want to be in. And that's, I think, what's so hard about this is that we could do all these things. We can have these protocols like Dr. Emmert's talking about. We may be able to do that at least at our conference level and maybe at the Autonomy 5, but that may not be enough to be able to play football this fall.
Yeah, so speaking of college football, ESPN college football analyst Paul Feinbaum earlier this week said the outlook for the college football season is very, very bleak. So Jen and Pat, if you were to wager, do you think there's a better chance there'll be a fall 2020 football season or a spring 2020 football season?
We're not allowed to wager on college sports.
I need another word.
That question.
If you were to forecast.
That's a good answer. I like that answer. Well, the good
Let's
thing
do
is
a forecast.
it came from Paul Feinbaum. So I mean, we all know this. The reality of the environment we're in right now is these weeks that happen. I mean, look at last week for the Pac-12 with Stanford and their decision to eliminate sports to the Big Ten and the Pac-12 going to conference only. So, I mean, we are still a long way away from September and college football. And our goal as a league is, one of the big reasons why we made the decision to go to conference only is just give ourselves some time. Because at the end of the day, we just got to be patient and see how the world keeps evolving, how our region of the country keeps evolving, and hopefully we get to a place that we can play sports. And if not, we'll make that decision at that time. But right now, we're going to continue to make decisions that give us options, and hopefully, when the time is right, we have the option to play, and we'll see if we can get there.
Time is moving quickly, though, and those players are coming back to campus and trying to prepare for a season. So, what are I guess it would be a plan C or D to go to spring. Is that something that you both support if you're at that juncture that you can't pull off collegiate sports this fall?
I think, one of the things that gets forgotten a lot in the dialogue around fall and football is that we have other students in other sports here, and so does WSU. And so it's a lot more complicated than one team. Because we have multiple teams in the fall that would be competing. So I don't think at this point we're still looking for shortened fall seasons in our Olympic sports and a delayed start of a conference only for football. How we would then take all those fall sports and move them into the spring, I don't know if that's feasible. Could and should we try to explore doing that for football? If we're able to, I would be an advocate for that. But I also recognize that there are a lot of health and safety issues that we would have to really explore with our Pac-12 Medical Advisory Committee because of the back-to-back seasons, and it would likely have an impact on our season for the following year. So it's not as easy as people think, and it's very complex. But for Pat and I, our business to support all those other Olympic sports does not work if we don't have football revenues.
Absolutely. Adrian, the Sounders are one of the few professional teams or one of the few professional sports right now that's actually playing, as we mentioned, sequestered in the bubble for the MLS's back tournament down in Orlando. What was going through your mind when the Sounders kicked off last Friday?
Well, look, a lot of emotions, certainly some sense of satisfaction and just, appreciation and happiness that we were getting sports going, but also, certainly a level of concern for the safety of everybody involved. We understand that to some degree we're the tip of the spear. NWSL was actually the first professional league to get going, but we were the first men's league, and yeah, it's certainly great to see sport going again. But I don't think anybody will really be satisfied until we're back to some semblance of normal. Because that situation in Orlando is not normal. It's suboptimal for players, for fans, for broadcasters, for partners, for everybody involved. But it's it was the best of all the bad possible scenarios to get back up and running.
So what are you hearing from Coach Smetzer and the rest of the team down there of what life is like inside the bubble? Give us kind of a firsthand look on what's going on down there.
Yeah. Look, our team arrived on, I think it was July 3rd. First game was July 10th. So been there about 2 weeks. I would say that the sentiment has changed over time. For sure, there was a lot more fear early on. Quite frankly, there were a lot more positive tests as players came into the bubble. You never know, but at least the data and the science sort of points to them bringing the virus with them to their then sequestered area, and so 2 teams were had to be pushed out of the tournament, Dallas and Nashville. But over the past few days, last week or so, there have been very few. I think our league has provided the data. I want to say 1 to 2 positive tests over the last few days or week. You know, I can tell you that the testing is still, you know, the testing isn't perfect, which you know, makes it challenging again. False positives, false negatives. The protocol is absolutely paramount, and I think our league has done a really good job of creating the right protocol, and more importantly, the players and coaches and staff have been awesome about following the protocol. So honestly, you know, again, people would rather be at home with their families, and you know, there is some level of trepidation still, but I think, you know, the players and coaches have started to get used to it. They've gotten into a rhythm. The games are a distraction. You know, again, in terms of suboptimal, it's 90 degrees and 90% humidity. So you add sort of that discomfort, just the weather. And again, it hasn't, you know, it's not a perfect situation, but it's got us back up and going. And you know, I think that the players are making the best of it. They have, you know, each team has a floor of a hotel. Each player has his individual room. There are sort of gathering spaces where they can play ping pong or pool or cards or video games. Again, protocol expected and required with masks and social distancing, even though they're in the bubble. So, you know, I would say that generally the reports are, you know, as positive as they could be, given the circumstances.
I'm sure Stefan Fry, the great Sounders goalkeeper, has a lot of time to work on his artwork in his own bedroom, since he's not rooming with Gustav.
Let's
right
hope
now.
so. I've already bought a piece from him, because when he's done playing soccer, he is going to make it as an artist.
Yes.
He's so talented and committed. So
Adrian, I got a question for you. Do you feel detached from your team right now? And how are you handling that?
Yeah, no, for sure, a little bit. You know, they may like that. I don't know. But you know, trying to check in as often as possible. But they honestly, you know, at one point I asked about going down to Orlando, and they just don't want high maintenance owners. Like, not that I'm high maintenance, but some owners are high maintenance, and they just don't need the distractions in the bubble down there. So.
Yeah, and Adrian, can I ask one other question, Adrian? So the players are not allowed to have any interaction with their families?
No, ours are families did not go, so it's just the players. You know, our tournament this was more of a 5 to 6 week. So, you know, look, it's a long time, but it was, you know, sometimes our teams go away for preseason for 3 weeks at a time you know, the NBA, I think, will have more challenges, because theirs is up to, I think, 3.5 months. So.
Jen and Pat, do you have any questions for Adrian about how to bring players back in safely? I mean, because that's essentially what you're dealing with right now as folks come into the training programs for the fall sports. Any specific questions, or Adrian, any advice on how to do that?
They've got the smartest scientists and epidemiology. Obviously, no, I wouldn't want to provide that sort of advice or guidance.
All right. Well, we'll let you off on the hook on that. Pat, just stepping back to a remark you made, you referenced Stanford, which noted, I think it was last week, where they're shutting down 11 sports programs across the institution, which was a very surprising move. So how is the UW and WSU thinking about the future of some of the sports programs that might be the power sports of basketball or football?
Yeah, if anything, Stanford's decision is indicative of where we're at as an industry. Is every solution to try to get through this is on the table. So as we go forward, it's like I tell everyone asks about what does it mean that we've gone conference only. I said, well, it means two things. One, we're playing no non-conference, and we're not starting week 1 of the season based on what was announced last week. So this is a week-to-week deal. We're trying to figure this thing out. Jen talked about there are financial implications, significant, if we don't play football specifically. But I mean, the other thing in our favor is University of Washington, Washington State University, the other Pac-12 institutions are going to survive this. All these institutions have survived world wars, 9/11, recessions, the Great Depression. We'll survive this. How we look on the other side of this is a whole different story. But the universities will survive, and we got to make sure that our athletic departments survive at the same time.
Great. Jen, any thoughts on that?
No, I think he summarized it well. Everything's on the table, right? I mean, at UW, we already did some pretty significant cost reductions with salary reductions. My entire athletic department has been furloughed. We've done major operational cuts. So we did all that with a collective path forward with shared sacrifice so that we could keep all 22 of our sports programs. That's also in a model where we're expecting to have some revenue this year, but I think it's too early to tell. But, I've been through sport elimination. I was here as an administrator when we eliminated the swimming programs. I remember clear as day walking into that room and watching our athletic director deliver that news and watching those student athletes. And I said to myself, if I ever become an athletic director, that is going to be the last thing I ever have to do. And so we're very motivated. We're an opportunity program, right? That's what higher education is all about, is opportunity. College sports is about opportunity. So we're going to fight like hell to keep our sports programs here at UW.
Is there a scenario where you could imagine some less contact-oriented sports? Let's say, I'll bring up golf. My nephew is actually a collegiate golfer at the University of Richmond, that a sport like that could be brought back, but other sports maybe not so? Or is this going to be across-the-board decision for sports?
I'll jump on this first and then Pat weigh in. I mean, I think our goal is to try to, all of our student athletes, it needs to be fair and equitable in how we're looking at this. So I think we're trying to look at this across our sports. So sure, in the fall, could cross country run and maybe have less issues with the way that they compete? Sure, but they also still have to travel to go to competition, and they still have to have people to compete against. And so, we really are trying to look at this across our sports in a consistent way for this upcoming year. You feel differently, Pat?
No, it's a travel piece that even little things like working on campus housing. And I'm sure Jen's run into this and rightfully so. I mean, there's consternation on campus because our student athlete population is scheduled to travel. That's not to say a general student isn't going to travel, but those are things going on in the mind of all the students, all the student affairs, division of student affairs on every campus is how do you manage, student athletes coming in and out of campus. So to your golf question, it goes back to what Jen said. They still got to compete against somebody.
Right. So we've been talking a lot about the pandemic and COVID and the impact on sports. Obviously, the racial equality protests are another massive story going on at this time. Pat and Jen, you're both kind of trailblazers in sports. Jen, one of the few women athletic directors out there. Pat, as I mentioned, the first Asian American athletic director of a Power 5 conference. What does the recent social justice movement mean to both of you personally, and how you're trying to incorporate that into the education for the larger sports community that you represent?
Well, I would say just a lot of pride. One, seeing how our student athletes have reacted, the conversations we've had, the things that they're working on, and then just being aligned with people like Jen and our conference to see what our conference has done. I have a lot of respect for what Jen does with her program, the willingness to partner, the willingness to share ideas. But we're in a unique space being in the Pac-12. Historically, we've been the most diverse conference. We've been a conference that really pays attention to equality and inclusion and diversity issues. So as these problems, like, we're no different than Jen. We're both a part of athletic programs that we were having conversations about race and inequities and social justice before the disruption happened. So because we both have athletic departments that have had those conversations, does it guarantee success going forward? No, but it gives us a level of communication we can have with our student athletes as we all work together to try to find, where are we headed as a country and how do we get there together? It's the opportunity of a lifetime. I always tell everyone, prior to all the social unrest, in our industry, we have name, image, and likeness, and student athletes getting compensated for it, and COVID-19 were the two biggest, changes that we were ever going to have in our industry. Then the social justice, anti-racism piece came up, and ultimately that's more important than anything we do with name, image, and likeness or how we get out of COVID-19.
Yeah, so Pat, you were recently named as the co-chair of the Pac-12's Anti-Racism Coalition. What's the goal of that group, and what do you hope to see come out of that long term?
Well, we're in the infant stages of it. We just had a nice meeting with all the, all the vice presidents or vice chancellors on all campuses in charge of diversity and inclusion. But it's really about what kind of programming we can build for our student athletes and coaches. We have a very diverse group of student athletes, but we also have a coaching industry that sad but true, is not as diverse as it should be. So are there things we should be doing as a league? One of the nice things about being a part of the Pac-12 is you look at our athletic director room, it's the most diverse in the country. And it's really indicative of the presidents we have and how they hire, or the institutions that we come from. So there's a lot of work to be done, but you have a league that's motivated to do it, and a league motivated to put some resources behind it. So we're going to keep working toward figuring out what the role of that committee is, of that group is, but we'll get there and hopefully have some impact on our student athletes and coaches.
Absolutely. Adrian, Justin Morrell, who is the defender for Toronto FC and is leading the Black Players for Change coalition in Major League Soccer, led a very emotional protest as MLS's back kicked off. Thought it was very well organized. Are there things that the league is doing now to make sure that the Black Lives Matter movement sticks and leads to permanent change in the organization as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Again, early days as well, but the league has partnered with the Black Players Union. Justin, they've got fantastic leadership in that organization. So at the league level, there's a lot going on to try and support, and at the team level. I think every team in our league has done, their version of trying to engage, learn, figure out how we can make an impact. We've spent a bunch of time in task force and subcommittees with our minority staff, and trying to figure out what it is we think we can take on, how we can make change, and again, it's still a work in progress, but for sure a piece to the puzzle will be voter participation. We did a pretty cool partnership with a local artist, guy named Teddy Phillip, who was involved in the BLM movement in Chop Chaz. Amazing artist, designed really cool. You've probably seen some of the imagery, the captain's armband that Nico is wearing, and there's some really cool imagery about getting out vote as well. So that's for sure an area that we will dive into, among others.
Yeah, wonderful. Pat, you mentioned the recent NCAA changes as it relates to compensation of student athletes, and I wanted to ask you and Jen about that because I think it's a very interesting development. How do you see that altering college sports in the next few years?
Well, it's a game changer. But it's the right thing to do. Our student athletes should be able to get compensated on their name, image, and likeness. I think how we educate and how we manage it is going to be where the devil's in the details. So the NCAA is working on defining what the parameters are. Congress is going to weigh in, it seems like, or our elected officials are going to continue to weigh in. I think the goal is to get a national standard, not state by state, but there's still quite a bit of work that needs to get done. But it is going to change, and it's going to change a lot of things. It's going to change locker room dynamics, hopefully in a positive way. But I mean, it is one of those things that you can see it changing how recruiting's done. You could see a lot. I mean, there are a lot of tentacles with name, image, and likeness that we'll have to figure out as we go.
Jen, how do you think it's going to change?
I'm with Pat. I mean, I think it is the right thing to do. I think there's a ton of opportunity for our student athletes, and our student athletes should have access to the same opportunities as a student on our campus would, to be able to financially benefit from their name, image, and likeness. I think every great idea has its consequences, though. And to Pat's point, the guardrails, I serve on one of these NIL committees with NCAA, and I mean, we just go in circles trying to figure out how to guardrail this thing. And to Pat's point, it absolutely needs to be managed from a national level. We compete in national championships. We have national recruiting restrictions and rules and regulations. And so, I think it's the right thing to do, but I actually worry it's going to put more pressure on students. It's going to, the more they have opportunities to commercialize, the younger they are, with all the other pressures we see student athletes have. I think that there's going to be consequences there that people aren't thinking about when they're thinking that this is what we need to do.
Yeah, we've got a lot of founders and entrepreneurs on the call here today. And so I know they're going through, as Adrian alluded to, changes and dealing with stress points in their own businesses. I think they'd like to hear your perspective on kind of what sort of leadership lessons are guiding you through this period. Anything that stands out in terms of how you're navigating this and something that's resonated with each of you?
The one nice thing about college athletics, because we deal with, Jen and I are getting older. It's that old adage, we're getting older, but they're still 18 to 21 or 22, no matter what the year is. So we're ultimately in an adapt or die type of industry, and we have to adapt to the young people. So the good thing for us is we're wired in that way. The most successful administrators and coaches do a great job of adapting. Entrepreneurs, founders, like you had talked about with that are watching this, they obviously adapt to what's going on in the environment or in society. So as we just go forward, it's been nice to see, I'm like Jen, it's been nice to see our coaches, the leaders within our athletic department adapt and teach differently, communicate differently, build teams differently. So no matter what, I mean, how we interact with human beings may have changed immensely over the last couple of months. But the reality is, hey, as long as we're willing to adapt, to push ourselves and get out of our comfort zones a little bit, understanding we all have different roles within an organization and we all have to excel at those roles, we're still able to get to places. I mean, I'd argue that, these last couple of months, I've never been busier and I've never been slower at the same time. You're bogged down with all these meetings. You're trying to be more efficient with people's time because, by 3 or 4 o'clock, people are all quote unquote zoomed out. But you also know that, hey, we have a responsibility. We got to keep moving our enterprise forward, and we can't wait. We can't let adversity like this get in the way of what we're supposed to be doing.
Adrian or Jen, a leadership lesson that has resonated with you for this time?
Yeah, for me, sorry, Jen, to jump in, but look, this is probably an indication of poor leadership prior to this or poor awareness, but just how difficult this pandemic is mentally for for people and what the pressures that it creates. And again, for me, I think I am more aware now of what individuals are going through on a day-to-day basis than maybe I was or should have been before. I think one lasting thing for me that, again, probably the people I work with will hate, but has felt better for me. And I think I may have even tried it on you, John, which is that I don't call people very much anymore. I FaceTime. If it's one-on-one, I FaceTime all the time now, based on getting used to video conferencing. And I want to see people and kind of get a look at how they're doing, see if I can make sure that they're okay. Look them in the eyes, see body language. And so, again, I've never been a big email person. I prefer to talk now. I prefer to video as opposed to talk. Obviously, being in person is the best, but yeah.
Jen, how about you? Is there a specific leadership lesson you'd like to share?
Yeah, so my leadership purpose is to bring inspiration and courage to let your whole self shine through. And so I'm a little bit out there sometimes with my leadership style to begin with. So I've actually really been enjoying this time because everything else with competition slowed down. I can actually teach, and not just for myself, but for others in our department, this whole concept. I really believe mind, body, soul, when we're fully connected, we're going to get optimal results. And we teach that with our student athletes, but we tend to not teach it for ourselves. We don't necessarily always model it. We have coaches that don't always model it, administrators that don't always model it. So, I've been doing some weird stuff. It's out there. We had a budget meeting before we furloughed, and I made everybody do a gratitude journal. Then we had to meditate together. I'm teaching a boot camp class for people in our department. And so I just think and that's really important for me. I have a choice too. And so I think when I feel like I'm accountable to show that and teach that for others, then I'm going to be accountable to myself too. So I think it's just we talked about perspective earlier. I'll just say it again. We can really get too caught up in ourselves in the world that we're living in, and in sports in particular, because of the exposure we all have and the visibility that we have. You can start to take it in a way that isn't necessarily balanced out with the world that we're living in. So I just think being able to offer perspective so that people can fully develop themselves during this time has been a really cool experience for me as a leader during this challenging time.
Well, Jen, I think I would love to have a meditation class about this time. I could use one. I know we're coming short on time here, and we did have a lot of audience questions, so I wanted to get to a few of them. Interestingly, there were a lot of questions that came in about esports. So I guess just throwing it out there, do you think this is a watershed moment for esports? And do you think it will take root in a much bigger way as a result of traditional sports not being played right now? Silence.
Adrian's smiling, so he needs to answer that question.
Yeah, yes. I was waiting for you guys to.
We have all these traditional sports people on here.
Sports to the college campuses. Look, I think that innovators and disruption, to your point, John, provides opportunity. I think it's too early to say. For sure, right now, esports is probably a better place to be than physical sports. But what happens in the long run, I can't say.
And I know the Pac-12 has some esports activities going on. Are those thriving right now? And are you seeing larger adoption or audience or interest in that?
I don't know about you, Pat. We have esports here. They're obviously not under our umbrella. They're part of student life. And I don't know if we've seen an uptick in participation. I think students have just been so thrown off by their student experience having to go online this spring. But I do believe that the esports is going to continue to grow. I completely understand the revenue behind it and the marketability of it, it's hard for me because I don't see that connecting with the physical and emotional development and all the things that are developed through team and physical sport here. But I also realize I'm almost 51 and I need to adapt. Champions adapt, right, Pat Chun? You were just talking about that, Billie Jean King. So I probably need to be a little bit more flexible in understanding that moving forward.
There were also a lot of questions about VR. And obviously there's been a lot of promise around VR. It hasn't really taken root the way I think many people thought 3 or 4 years ago. But it seems like this would be an environment where VR could perhaps enhance that fan experience. Are any of you doing anything with VR? Are you seeing it or seeing any teams that are doing anything interesting as it relates to getting maybe fans more engaged with the teams?
That sounds expensive, so I think Adrian should speak to that.
Yeah, look, John, we were early to the party and did a bunch of stuff in VR.
And then it just did not hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'll wait for Pat and Jen to show us how to use VR. I think that it will slowly take hold more and more. I think that, obviously if this plays out in a bad way in terms of the disease and, this has a longer life, then I could see, some more opportunity.
Yeah.
Why don't we challenge your viewers and your constituents, John? They're probably smart enough to figure something out for all of us. And
there was a lot of venture capital money that went down the drain chasing the VR promise here for the last few years, which did not pan out. Another audience question, number of questions about bringing fans back and kind of what you're doing now to prepare to get fans back. And then there was a specific question of how many fans do you actually need in CenturyLink Field for the Sounders or at the Husky or Cougar football games to actually break even? Have you looked at that analysis at all in terms of, you can make it work if there are 10,000 fans at CenturyLink or 15?
We're one of the, to break even's a whole different story. We got to be at 95% capacity and we deficit spend right now. So we've modeled a bunch of things. We've been working with Jen's team. We've been working with the Sounders and the Seahawks. The challenge is where we're at 3 weeks ago is very different than where we're at today. And because we paused on what we're going to do in conference games, we paused basically what we're going to try to submit to Whitman County and to the governor's office. So, we want to have sports inside Martin Stadium. What that looks like, we don't know just yet. Thankfully for us, Whitman County as a whole has not been hit hard by COVID-19. I think we have less than 30 cases, no deaths in our entire county. Does that mean our county is going to let us open the doors for people all over the state to come to our football games? Probably not. So we just got to, whenever we get to that point where we got to submit something, we'll work with campus to figure out what campus's comfort level is, and we'll go for it. But I feel great about all the dialogue that's happened amongst all the major sports entities in the state, where we can all come together and say, all right, these are the standards we're going to put in place to ensure health and safety for the fans that can be there. I know we all want as many fans in the building as possible, but wherever the number is, it's nothing that's going to compromise anyone's health and safety.
I didn't realize that Whitman County was so good. Could you host a professional soccer team for a season or two?
We can put you in a bubble. Yes. Surrounded by a bunch of wheat fields.
That's great. Well, we're just about out of time here. I know we've talked about some heavy stuff here, and it maybe hasn't been the most uplifting conversation at times because everyone wants sports back. Everyone wants to be in those stands again, cheering on their teams. But we're hoping we all get there. Let's end it with this question. We'll go around the horn just really quickly. What's your favorite sports moment, and what does it say about the power of sports? Want to leave on an uplifting note here for folks as we start to head into the weekend.
I'll go first. For me, probably it's still the opening game in 2009 for the MLS Sounders. And, you know, for me, it was an emotional moment for all sorts of reasons. You know, as a kid who grew up in Seattle, going to the Sounders games as a kid, starting in 1974 with my family, you know, went to every game for 10 years until that original team left. And when the 2009 Sounders started, my father had passed away recently, and, you know, he was sort of always my soccer support. And then to see the stadium filled with families, you know, with kids that could have been me 35 years earlier, was, you know, I guess that was my top sporting moment.
That's cool. And now, Adrian, I know I always see you at Sounders matches with your son on your shoulders celebrating some of those moments. So passing the torch for sure. Jen, how about you?
I hate this question, John. I'm like going through my mind, like so many, I don't want to pick one over the other.
Opening day of the Sounders in 2009.
Yeah, yes. Sorry, I'm not going to say the Sounders. I would say watching Kelsey Plum break the NCAA basketball record for leading scorer for women's basketball. And I've seen, I mean, I'm a Husky football girl. I grew up in Husky Stadium. I've been to all kinds of Rose Bowls and watched amazing wins in football and amazing other wins in our other sports. That moment, because just to see a female be that elite that was part of our university, and to see this arena, literally you could not breathe in the arena. Like with every shot, she just went off. I think she scored like 42 that game. And I'm just in the stands, just like crying. So I think it's probably the mother in me. That moment was just really, really special.
Well, I hate to put you on the spot, but great moment, Jen. Thank you for that. And Pat, we'll end with you. And it can't be your great moments at the College of Worcester basketball camp in Worcester, Ohio, my hometown, shooting hoops, which I know you attended.
I will tell you this, and it's not a game. It's actually when College Game Day showed up at Washington State. Just because the Cougs here have always have a chip on their shoulder, and to see for 15 years that flag wave weekly on that show, and then when Reese Davis does this wonderful thing and how he announces it, and it's awesome. It's 6 a.m. There's, I think, 20,000 people out around the stage, and ESPN counts it down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you know, the second Reese goes into his monologue, you know, the whole country all of a sudden learn firsthand how crazy these Cougs are, that they're willing to show up at 6 a.m. just to show their love and passion for their alma mater is pretty unique and special about Washington State. So just to have been here for such a proud moment for our institution, and just see all the people come out just to express their love for Washington State is something I'll never forget for the rest of my life.
Can I say something about that, John? So sure. All of the Huskies on this are going to just be so irritated with me. But I was sitting on my couch that morning watching that, and I texted you, Pat. I don't know if you remember, but like I actually have goosebumps right now thinking about that moment, because that's why we all do this, right? We want to unite community, and we want to bring people together to be part of something bigger than themselves. And to know Pat, to know what kind of leader he is, and to know all that he had done over there, to have a moment like that, like to experience that in his career for the university. I mean, I was very emotional watching it. Like I was a part of Washington State University, and I am not a Coug, and I will never be a Coug. But it really was special, Pat. You did something that day that nobody will ever forget your university for.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that.
Well, I think we hear the common thread there. There are all these physical experiences that we had interacting with other fans or players. And I think it shows the power of sports. And here's hoping to us getting back to that period where we can enjoy some more of those moments, because this is a hard period for a lot of folks who love sports like myself. And I'm hoping we can get back there as soon as possible.
What's your favorite moment?
Oh, gosh, Adrian. I want to cut to time. I'll share it with you I'll tell you what it was. Here's my favorite sports moment from this year, and I've got the picture on my wall in the GeekWire offices. You know, the Seattle Sounders have a media game, And I got invited to the media game this year. And I made it a point of having a good performance. And so taking the ball across the 18 and CenturyLink Field in the media game and blasting one into the upper 90 that got the attention of the coaching staff. So
was there a goalie?
There was a goalie. Yes, there was a goalie. So that was my great moment. But anyway, with that, I want to say a great thanks to Adrian, Jen, and Pat for being here. Great insights. Thanks for sharing your time with us. And also a huge thanks to our sponsors today for helping to put on this virtual event, Davis Wright Tremaine and Pure Storage. And with that, we will say goodbye, and we hope to see you at the GeekWire Awards virtually July 23rd. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.